our theme is Stories of the Path, and we are exploring the Buddhist path in 5 stages through stories. And for the past, since the new year, we've been looking at the stage of integration, the first great stage of the path, integration. In terms of different stories, we've been telling different stories just to draw out different aspects of that. So, very briefly, in case you've missed some of the earlier talks, to become integrated, to achieve anything really, we need to become an integrated, unified, whole person, a person of integrity who can follow through on our commitments, achieve what we've set out to achieve. And to do that, we need to have kind of all of our energy united in the same direction. But to begin with, we're not like that. We can make a set out with an intention and then find ourselves conflicted, almost divided. It can seem like there's, the experience can be like there's lots of different selves who have different volitions, make different decisions at different times. And so we can feel that we are conflicted or divided. So the first stage of the path, integration, it involves the faculty of awareness, using mindfulness or awareness to become more aware of ourselves, get to know ourselves, and to harmonise, gather together all these different aspects, all these different volitions, and to be able to put them in service of the Dharma. So we've looked at integration through different stories and brought out different perspectives, different aspects of how we might integrate ourselves in different ways. So last week we heard about Machidasa told us about how we can integrate ourselves through time. We can integrate painful experiences from the past. We can have the sense of a younger version of ourselves that we need to make peace with, to integrate. We heard from Pranya Sri how dishonesty disintegrates us, by untruth causes conflicts and splits within us. We've also heard about to be able to be reliable and have integrity. There was a story I told about King Arthur or Gawain and the hag, that we have to marry what we find ugly. We have to commit to what is unpleasant if we want to be reliable. There's going to be times when it gets ugly and we have to decide whether we're going to stick with it or turn away from it. And also to turn towards what we find ugly in ourselves as well. So we've explored integration in different ways, and this evening I'm going to tell another story and draw out just one further aspect of integration. Then next week we're going to hear 3 Sangha members just tell their own more personal story about integration in their own lives. So this evening we're going to hear about the Lambton Worm, which is a Northumbrian folk tale. So I'm going to tell the story in a minute, but first I just want to hear us to listen to it being sung by a man I just found on YouTube called Geordie Wilson. He's singing a version of this folk song. And then if you're not familiar with the Northumbrian accent, I'll translate it afterwards.
Wished, lads, had you gods, I'll tell yous all enough a story. Wished, lads, had you gods, I'll tell you the one. Once in the morning, young Lambton went fishing in the weir. He catched a fish upon his yoke, he thought it awfully queer. Know what kind of fish it was, young Lambton couldn't tell. He hadn't fashed to carry it, yams, he hid it to no well. Wished, lads, had you gobs, I'll tell yous all an awful story. Wished, lads, had you gobs, I'll tell you who'd go on. No Lambton is inclined to gun, he'd frightened for him was. He joined a troop at nights that cared for neither wounds nor scars. Off he went to Palestine, where queer things him befell. He very soon forgot all about that funny one do no well. Wished, lads, had you gobs, I'll tell you all an awful story. Wished, lads, had you gobs, I'll tell you about the one. With a warmy grody, 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 an awful size. He'd a great big he'd get big gob, he'd get big goggly eyes. And when it meet, he crawled about to pick up bits of news. A favour dry upon the road, he milked a dozen cows. Wished, lads, had you gobs, I'll tell you all an awful story. Wished, lads, had you gobs, I'll tell you about the one. the news of this most awful war, and his queer gannons on. Soon crossed the seas and got to the lugs of Bowden, brave Sir John. So back he come from Palestine, cut it in 3 halves, and I put pity in all them bends and sheep and calves. Wish, lads, had you gob, I'll tell you on an awful story. Wish, lads, had you gobs, I'll tell you Buddha Worm. We know you know how all the folk on both sides of the weir lost lots of sheep and lots of sleeping living.
So I don't know if you followed any of that. So I love the Northumbrian dialect. I lived there for 8 years. I lived in Newcastle upon Tyne, and so I'll do my best to translate. Well, I'll tell you the story. I'll translate what was being said. So the singer was saying, "Listen up and hold your tongues. I've got an awful story to tell you." And it's a story about a man called Lord Lambton, who lived in Northumbria, close to the River Wear. And the story goes that the Lord Lambton was a bit of a lad, really. He wasn't the kind of most well-behaved young gent. He was a bit of a lad, and the story, and it's not that. What he was accused of was not going to church. Actually, in this was seen as being a very bad thing in the Middle Ages, and so Lord Lambton on a Sunday went fishing instead of going to church. He was supposed to, and it was banned. We weren't allowed to fish on a Sunday, but he wasn't interested in that, and he went fishing. And the story says he was warned by a kind of mysterious old gentleman kind of on the side, just this was a bad idea not to do this, but he thought, no, I'm going to go fishing on Sunday. Stuff what I'm supposed to do. And all the way through Mass, he didn't catch anything apparently, but then right at the end, he caught a really strange, ugly-looking fish. It had 9 eyes. It looked really foul. He described it later as though he'd caught the devil. And he just threw it, he hurried it down the well. He went to the nearest well and threw it away. He threw it down the well. He just was so, spooked by it, disgusted by it. And then got on with his life, really. Forgot all about it. Got on with his life, his kind of life of partying and mischief. And then the story fast forwards to him now being a grown man. Lord Lambton is now a grown man. And he's gone off to fight in the Crusades in Palestine. And he's off there trying to actually do what he thinks is noble, to serve a noble cause, fighting in Palestine in the Crusades. But meanwhile, the worm, the fish that he'd thrown, he'd hurried down the well, had started to grow and grow and grow, and it had now become a huge dragon-like beast, the Lambton Worm. And it had big goggly eyes. It had great big goggly eyes, the singer was saying. And this worm that had now started to terrorise the kingdom where Lord Lambton had left behind. He'd gone off to fight the Crusades in Palestine, but the worm came out of the well and started to cause terror where he lived. Cattle were going missing, sheep were going missing, and people were going missing. And it said that the size of the worm, could wrap itself 9 times around the nearest hill, and that's where it lived, was wrapped around this hill. And then Lord Lambton returned from his battles. He returned from the Crusades and discovered what had happened to this fish, this kind of terrible thing that he'd thrown down the well had become this huge monster that was terrorising the lands. And he undertook to try to defeat it. Meanwhile, lots of brave knights had visited the area and tried to beat this dragon, this worm, and they'd all been killed. And again, this time we're told that a witch appeared and told Lambton that if he was going to try and defeat this worm, he needed to make some armour covered in spikes. Oh yeah, because this was a detail, that every time somebody chopped a bit off the worm, it would just grow back again. It was kind of undefeatable almost, but this witch said to him, well, you have to fight it in the weir, you have to fight it in the river, and make armour covered in spikes. That's the first thing you need to do. And the second thing is, if you want to succeed, after you kill the worm, you need to kill the first living person that you first living being that you see after defeating the worm. That's kind of part of the kind of magic, the spell. So Lord Lambton gets this armour made. He gets this armour covered in spikes. He goes down to the River Wear, and he does battle with the Lambton Worm, this huge big dragon. And it wraps itself around him, but the spikes sever the worm, and it's cut into lots of pieces and washed away by the river before it can reform. And meanwhile, Lord Lambton's come up with a plan. He thinks he's clever, so he said to his father, the kind of ruler of the area, they've made an arrangement to release the hunting hound when he blows his horn. When Lord Lambton blows on his horn and he's defeated the worm, release the hound, and then Lord Lambton, that's the first living thing he's seen, he can sacrifice this hound. But his father is so delighted to see the worm released, he just runs out to embrace his son. And Lord Lambton is bound by this oath to kill his father. But he doesn't want to do this, so he kills the hound instead. He kind of doesn't go through with the oath that he's made. And we're told that his family was cursed for 9 generations. For 9 generations of Lord Lambtons were cursed. And we're told that all of them died in unpleasant ways, and that was the Lambton curse from him not following through with this oath that he'd made. So a strange tale. That's the tale of the Lambton Worm. That's what Geordie Wilson, that folk singer, was telling us about, the awful story about the Lambton Worm with big goggly eyes. So, yeah, what I want to do is just to draw out one aspect, another aspect of integration in relation to this story, that this story, could be seen to be telling us. And this is a particular detail of the story. So Lord Lambton, he's described in the tales, the legends, as being kind of a mischievous, kind of unskillful, bit of a tearaway. Yes, he's not a man of integrity. As a young man, he isn't a skillful man, an ethical man. And basically, he throws away this kind of product of his unskillfulness, this kind of ugly fish, and doesn't want anything to do with it. He throws it down a well where nobody will see it, and it would be forgotten about. And instead, as a grown man, he goes off to wage war elsewhere. He finds evil in a strange, faraway land, and he goes off on a crusade to do battle with other people, with strange people, all the time kind of never having dealt with what he's thrown down the well. So what has this got to do with integration? So I think it's probably true to say we kind of borrowed the term integration from the psychologist Carl Jung. It came into the Tree Ratner Speak through Carl Jung, and Carl Jung taught that what we need to do, the first thing we need to do is to integrate what he called the shadow aspect of our being, our psyche. And this can be seen, detailed by Lord Lambton. He's unskillful. He's in a way he's got his own evil, his own kind of unskillfulness that he's in denial about. He hasn't dealt with it, and instead he's thrown it down a well for nobody to see, for him to forget about. So, to integrate ourselves, our being, we can't do that in a way. We found that we will have done that at different points in our lives, things that we don't like about ourselves, that we maybe find ugly or socially unacceptable. We chuck them away down a well and forget about them. And instead of taking responsibility and dealing with our own unskillfulness, we kind of conceal it, we deny it, we conceal it. We're not really aware, we're blind to it. We're unaware of it. And instead we find fault elsewhere. We find fault in other people, in groups of people, strangers, people that we don't know, people that we don't trust. So, we see Lord Lambton go off to fight a crusade against other people. He sees evil, across the seas and travels to fight this crusade, the evil out there. But meanwhile, he's never really dealt with his own unskillfulness. He's not taking responsibility for his own evil, his own unskillfulness. So the stage of integration involves this. It involves us really becoming honest with ourselves and taking stock and taking responsibility for our own behaviour, our own actions. And in a way, it's often that causes damage closer to home. So while Lord Lambton's finding fault and waging war in far-off lands, his own unskillfulness, the product of that, is causing havoc at home. His homelands are being kind of ravaged by the fruit of his unskillfulness. And often that's the case. Our unskillfulness that we're kind of in denial about, it kind of leaks out with those that we're closest to, our loved ones, our friends, our relations, our colleagues. In those situations, they get to see the worst of us, and maybe we're a bit blind to that. So I think this is the detail of integration that we can see through the story of the Lambton Worm. The task is really, to get to know ourselves, to develop this self-awareness through commitment to the precepts, through trying to live ethically. We start to find out more about the ways that we're unethical, the things that were blind spots to us that we're unaware of. And also through the cultivation of awareness, of mindfulness, we get to see more and more of ourselves, and we discover more and more the situations where we are unskillful, and we can take responsibility for that, rather than seeking to look for fault, find fault in other people. The thing, we take care of our own faults. We look at those and take responsibility for those. So this is particularly relevant at the moment where, in a way, it seems like the world is divided on many, many different levels around world issues. In a way, there's world issues, and people seem to find fault with each other and see evil in each other, and really go on crusades. The world seems very polarized, and people can see people who disagree with them, have different views to them as evil, and they need to do battle against each other. And in a way, it's easy to do that. It's much easier to find fault out there in the world in other people and other groups of people than to really take responsibility for our own unskillfulness. And that is the task. Really, the task in terms of integration is to take to look inward and learn about ourselves, transform our own unskillfulness. So I'm not saying, I don't want to be misunderstood, we shouldn't try and transform the world or debate other people, but it's this issue where we see faults in others rather than as a way of avoiding seeing the faults in ourselves. It's a way of avoiding the truth in a way. We kind of it's a convenient way of in a way righteous. We become righteous. It's a righteous indignation where we become indignant at the faults of others, and that allows us to conveniently forget that we have our own faults and not to deal with them, not to take care of them. Yeah, so there was an example, I was given some notes, and an example was suggested about this can sometimes be the case or stereotypically it can be associated with veganism. So I need to be careful and say, well, it's not the case of my friends who are vegans. I've not encountered them to be like this, and I aspire to be vegan. I think it's a really beautiful thing. But stereotypically, like people can associate vegans with kind of going on a crusade. Sometimes it's like they have to convince other people and can get very angry with other people who don't agree with them, and it's just an example of an issue where people can become indignant and find faults in others, and actually they've lost awareness of the people that they're with. They're kind of there's a lack of awareness of the people. I've had conversations with people. It feels like they're not really aware of me. They're a bit alienated. They're not aware of themselves, and they're quite indignant about this issue. And that's just one example. There can be many, many examples where we find fault and see fault in others, and we're kind of slightly alienated from ourselves. We've lost track of our awareness of ourselves and the other person. So I used that example with some care and caution, and I was saying, well, this isn't the case of my friends who I know, and on this particular course I aspire towards increasing veganism. But it can be stereotypical in society. It's a joke people will make, isn't it? For me, I was thinking about the Metabhavana and the fourth stage of the Metabhavana here as well, where we often, interestingly, I think this is true of Jungian psychology, we find faults in other people and get really incensed about things, traits in other people, often people close to us, who get really, really irritated about things in other people that actually are things that we don't like about ourselves. that we've kind of not fully recognised yet. I believe it's called transference, or we can also call it projection. We kind of project evil or unskillfulness onto another person. And that's the start of becoming aware of things in ourselves. It works both ways, actually. We can also become aware of really positive qualities in other people. And what's actually happening, where we're starting to become aware of that quality within ourselves. And the same's true of unskillfulness. We can find ourselves getting really, really irritated, really wound up by another person. And it's often really interesting if you really examine what is it about them that irritates you. Often it can be something in yourself that you kind of don't really like about yourself or don't want to admit about to yourself. So that's something maybe some homework and something to try out in the Metabhavana. In the fourth stage, the person who you see as an enemy, the person who's winding you up, who you're irritated with, could it be the case that that's actually, you're a bit like that sometimes, or you behave like that sometimes, or that's something you don't really like about yourself? So maybe think, what is it where does your ill will go? Maybe this is something to talk about in the groups. What is it that you get angry about, irritated with? And could that be something that that you don't like about yourself? So that's something to consider. And probably what I'll do also at this point to draw this out is tell a story that I sometimes tell on the introductory course about one of my neighbours who was called Barry. I sometimes hide his identity by changing the name, but it's a long time ago now, so hopefully I can reveal his identity. His true name is Barry. And my neighbour Barry, it was a snowy occasion, so it's a wintry evening like today. And we'd recently moved to a house. It's not the house we live in currently, so it's not a current neighbour, an old neighbour. He was very, very protective about a parking space outside of his house. And inadvertently, my wife and I had parked our car outside of his house, and it was snowy. And there were some lines painted, but because it was snowy, we didn't see that there were lines painted to say, don't park there. And he got really angry and incensed and kind of banged on our door and shouted at us and told us off for parking outside his house. And after that, I began to see him as an enemy, really, somebody that I saw and treated and related to as a bit of an enemy. So whenever I saw Barry over the road, I would kind of look away and pretend I hadn't seen him, ignore him, or maybe cast him a mean look, a kind of stern look or something, just to kind of let him know that I wasn't happy about him, his behaviour. And similarly, he didn't seem that warm towards me either. So we'd kind of got into this habitual relationship where we'd kind of polarise on this individual level, treating each other habitually like enemies. And then I think basically I was teaching an introductory course about habits and the gap and getting locked into habits in habitual ways of relating to people. And I realised I'd been doing this with my neighbour and not realised that I was doing it. It was kind of a blind spot. I hadn't realised this was happening. I was unaware that I was doing this. It was all going on kind of unconsciously almost, or without, I wasn't really aware of it. And what happened was another occasion I got a bang on the door, and it was Barry. And all the usual reactions were there. There's a kind of sense of fear, indignation in myself. And he said, is that your car parked outside my house? And I said, no, it's not. And he said, do you know who it is? And I said, I don't know who it is, no. But then, rather than responding in the usual way, I did something slightly different, which was I said to him, do you want a lift? Do you need to get somewhere? Can I give you a lift somewhere? And he was so surprised, so shocked. He just said, well, no, I don't actually need to go anywhere. I don't need to move my car off the drive. I just wanted to know who's parked there. And basically from that day onwards, the relationship changed. We no longer treated each other as enemies, and whenever I saw him, we'd say hello and wave to each other. And then he even started to bring me vegetables from his allotment, and he was just very, very friendly and warm towards me. So it's a tale of how we can find fault in other people in a way, and see another person as an enemy, and just get locked into that cycle of relating to somebody as an enemy. And what we really need is to kind of deal with what's going on internally in a way, tackle our own responses. And Yeah, so that's the story of my neighbour Barry, another story. Yeah, so yeah, I think I'll conclude by reminding us, the tale of the Lambton Worm. If we don't deal with our own unskillful responses and try to hide them or just forget about them or turn away from them, they won't, what happens is they get bigger, they cause damage, and they start to cause damage closer to home. We can find fault externally, we can find fault in other people, but meanwhile, our own unskillfulness will be causing harm to people around us, people close to us. And what we need to do is to take responsibility for that. Yeah. So become aware. Yeah, and in the Metabhavana maybe, just play with that in the fourth stage. What is it that is irritating me about this person? Could it be something that I am blind to in myself, in my own behaviour? And it's not always the case. It's not always that is why you're irritated, but it's surprising how often that can be the case. Okay, so I'll end that tale there of the Lambton Worm, and in your groups, maybe that's something you could discuss. Have you ever had an experience like that, where in that fourth stage of the Metabhavana, where you've realised you're reacting to something that you do yourself? If not, what is it that you get irritated about, and could it be something that you do yourself? Okay, so I'll stop there.